Alright, so we got a little different video today. Good old Electrolux finally started causing me problems. I think this thing was made in 2008. And normally I'm probably the kind of person after an appliance or some tool or something that's lasted 10 years, I go get a new one. If you've not noticed here lately, it's very difficult to go get a new one. We've called around everywhere trying to find a washer dryer combo, and nobody has both in stock. And if you were to order one now, you're looking at probably a month. Well, I don't really have a month, so I'm doing the next best thing. So we've got a couple of parts on this washer to replace. This is going to be just a generic video on I guess washer dryer replacement. Kind of going to give you some hints on how to find your parts and how you might go about replacing them. Generally these are really easy to fix, really easy to replace. I've taken the method, I've got one part in today that I think is actually the problem, but the reality is I just went ahead and ordered them all. They were in stock, they're easy to get, way easier to get than a brand new washer. But I think I'll probably be doing more of this if you know, supply chain doesn't improve, because it's very difficult to get new items, new cars, new washer, new dryer, what have you. There are quite a bit of parts still available depending on what you're looking for. I was lucky, I was able to get the parts. So stay tuned. We're going to get into this, and I'm going to give you some generic tips, and I'll go into some specifics of this Electrolux, but I'll give you some generic tips that pretty much will work on anything probably around your house. Alright, so this is what I think is wrong, and I'm going to go over why I believe that this is the problem. So one, this thing's pretty old, and this is a valve solenoid body. So the way this works is basically you've got solenoids here that will either blend hot and cold water. The problem with the washer is I get an error 35, which means that there's a overflow or underflow, some kind of flow issue, basically meaning that the basin has too much water, too little water, what have you. I'm pretty sure it's a too much water issue, because we've started noticing that the basin will actually have water in it, just the washer sitting. So keep that in mind on a washer. If this fails, you could actually get this to fail enough to where this will fill up and possibly flood the area. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and take care of it. And I'm relatively certain that that's the problem. I did go ahead and order it's not like a typical float sensor. It's actually a tube-based sensor. So there's a tube that runs down into the basin, and the sensor's up high up top. I did order one of those that hasn't come in yet. I don't think that's the problem, but I'm going to start with this simply because this is all in the top portion of this washer. I can get to it really easy. I can swap this out, and the quick test, if I do a spin, previously when I would do a spin, there would actually be a little bit of water coming out while it was spinning, which should not happen on a spin cycle. When I replace this, I'm going to try that spin cycle again, make sure that I don't have any water. That's probably going to fix the core issue of this washer while I've got it out. But let's get to this. It's kind of a little bit of a background of how this works. So obviously you got cold and hot. This basically goes through these little orifices here. On the Electrolux at least, be careful with these because there's actually a gasket on the old one that you'll have to reuse. I looked at the parts list. The parts list for those little 3 gaskets was more than $40. And there's plenty other YouTube videos on this particular Electrolux if you want to look those up. I'll try to find some and put some links. This is an Electrolux. It's an older model. If you're wondering what model you have, it's typically right here. So it's going to be below this face, and there'll be a part number on there. So that's the tip about how to find parts. You need your model number. If you pretty much go to Google and put in that model number and after it put parts, you're going to come up with a plethora of parts. I got mine on eBay. They were really close to me, so I knew shipping wasn't going to take very long. And the prices varied greatly. I think for this it was like $40 for this entire assembly. So basically I can replace pretty much all of the wear items in the top of this washer, you're looking at less than $100. So if I can take a 10-year-old washer and, you know, squeeze a couple more years out of it, at least if the supply chain issue kind of eases, that'll be great. I won't have any long break or have to travel to the laundromat. Okay, so nothing too super complex. Got a good set of pliers to get the hose off, and I got a square drive to get the screws out. And there probably will be a little water mess, so be expecting that. So one thing I'll mention, as I took that water out with the water hose off, there was zero pressure. Basically there was barely any water leakage, which leads me to believe that instead of that valve turning off, it's actually letting the water pressure bleed back into the washer, which is what I expected. But it's something to keep in mind, something to pay attention to. And the first thing you want to check at the inlet, see all that crud? That's stuff that comes up through the water line. Prior to I bought the house back in the 90s, we used to be on like a cast iron or a galvanized pipe water line, and they've since moved over to plastic. But that's where that come from. That come from the water supply from the water utility into the back of the washer. So I would imagine that valve is in probably pretty rough shape, and there probably wasn't a whole lot of water that was coming through that. That's pretty much it. We're into the washer. 2 screws. We're into the washer. And the valve that I'm going to replace is right here. It's really easy to get to. And just as a safety thing, make sure that you do unplug it before you get your hands down in here. So the pressure switch that I need to replace that I don't have today, it's actually right here. I'm going to move the camera here in a sec. Yeah, this is kind of cool. So I guess, oh wow, we got a, basically a technician sheet for the washer right here, taped to the top of this. That's kind of cool. It's the first time I've ever had this apart. Something to be mindful of that may help you, especially if you have an electrical or wiring issue. I see wiring diagrams and stuff on that. So it's pretty typical on anything that you want to take apart in one of these appliances. We've got some pieces sticking through some sheet metal on this side, and this is trapped on this side. We need to come back with this. So the piece that's back here, you're going to have to remove. You're going to have some plates where you can pull this away. Okay, now that we've kind of got everything out of the way, I think this is just kind of like a weight dampener that bolts here. So I removed that out of the way. That's exposed this. There is some play here. It looks like basically I'll be able to scoot this out. As you can see, there's a flange here, and there's gaskets and nipples that go into this box. So this has to move back some. One really convenient thing, all these are marked red to red, green to green, so that won't be a problem. So I'm going to unhook the solenoid, get this loose, and we'll see if we can get enough clearance to get this out, put the new one in. So as you can see, this is pretty tight fit. So I've got 3 screws out. I almost can't see at all on the back side of this valve. The trick is, most people have a phone in their pocket and a camera. You may need to turn on your light. Basically, you can just take your phone, stick it underneath and take a peek, and see where your screws are at. So a quick tip, that also works if you're trying to find how something goes together. I know that I've used this on the drawers for this machine to get the drawers out, because it's not obvious how they come out, but this really helps. So just a quick tip on how to see around corners. Okay, so we've got this out. I think I've got enough room to get it out. One of my gaskets stayed in. I'm just going to pull it out. So that's what the little gaskets look like, and you want to keep those unless you bought some new ones. Now we should be able to get that out. There's a little bit more room. And now we've got the old part out. You can see the new part looks pretty much similar to a little bit different plastic design on the tube. Do always cross-reference and make sure your valves are in the same place and it looks similar. That's pretty much it to get this out. So I kind of want to show you here what happens to these, especially if you've got old galvanized lines. See all that junk? So that's basically getting up in this valve assembly. I mean, they'll wear out naturally even if you have pure water running through, but this just accelerates it. This one's done very well given the junk that's went through. They do have small screens, but still some of that abrasive material comes through and wears out the valve. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put the new one in. We're going to reuse these gaskets, get everything slid back together, and do a pressure test to make sure we don't have a leak. Okay, so we got our new part slid in, and basically it's just going to go down and in. We'll put our little plastic cover piece on when we get this in. And sometimes you may want to put just a little bit of detergent or something on these gaskets so that they slide in easy. What you don't want to do is pull back. Once you start going in, make sure that you're going in. Don't pull back a little and then push back in again. Because of the design of those gaskets, they're relying on staying on that little thimble piece that sticks out. If you do have to pull it back out, pull it all the way out, reseat the gaskets, push it back in again. Okay, so now I'm just going to hook up the water. You want to be real careful with these connections. There's kind of a trick to these water hoses. So basically that flange slides on the tube. If you're too far back, it'll prevent the thing from spinning, or you're too far forward, it'll prevent it from spinning. So what you want to do is kind of grab it in your hand and get used to getting in that happy medium point where you can spin it very easily before you put it up, because you're putting metal threads on plastic threads. So you want that thing to be free and thread on really smoothly, and that way you don't end up stripping the threaded nipple off the end of the part you just put in. Kind of describe that when I got this off. So you can see I've got this in my hand, and if I pull it back, it doesn't spin very well. If I push it too far forward, it doesn't spin very well. I grab it like this right here, and what you want to do is just get it in that happy medium point where you can turn it. You can see it's kind of free and it moves. And then as you get it started threaded, you want to make sure this is seating up. So you kind of want to wiggle a little bit and make sure that you're actually seating the rubber washer. One tip when threading these screws, see a lot of people just kind of stick them in and force them on the way in. If you'll actually turn it backwards a little bit, and this works on plastic as well, turn it backwards a little bit till you kind of feel it bump up and then fall. And that's where you'll hit your original threads. One tip when threading these screws, see a lot of people just kind of stick them in and force them on the way in. If you'll actually turn it backwards a little bit, and this works on plastic as well, turn it backwards a little bit till you kind of feel it bump up and then fall. And that's where you'll hit your original threads. So basically, if I'm turning the screwdriver backwards, right there, it fell down back in the hole. That's going to get you back on your original threads, and it'll thread in really nice and smooth. I'm going to go ahead and put the top back on. I'm fairly confident we're going to have a leak. Really the only thing that would be a problem now is an electrical connection. But those are pretty positive connecting. We don't have any leaks. I'm going to go ahead and put the top back on, and we'll run it through a cycle and see what happens. So if I would have had the part, I would have replaced this level sensor as well. But since we don't have the part, I'm going to go ahead and put it together. I think this is probably going to fix it. But if you were doing your appliance, and especially parts nowadays, it's probably going to take at least 2 or 3 days, and that's even if you can find it on Amazon. For the cost of these things, always do the math on, if I disassemble the whole top of this washer, what part should I just go ahead and order and replace? Especially if you think it has something to do with the issue. On this Electrolux, I think the top side of this washer, the only things that may go bad is that sensor and the valve itself. So I think you're pretty safe, and it's relatively inexpensive just to go ahead and replace those as a set. And what I recommend anytime you take, even if you just disconnect the water, run these through a clean cycle. All it takes is one of those little pieces of rust to turn your white clothes into a really bad day. So I'm actually going to put cleaning in the reservoir here, and I'm going to run it through a clean cycle. Just as a test and to get any debris or anything I may have jarred loose through the washer. Okay, so basically we put it in system clean. It's kind of weird how the Electrolux do it. You go to hand wash, start it, stop it pretty quickly, start it back up and hold echo friendly and the control lock button, and that'll get you into the system clean mode. It's a 36-minute cycle. I put some Glean, I think is the brand that I use, but they make several different cleaners for front loaders, and we're going to start it and make sure all the water's working. So it definitely sounds different, mainly because there's more water going through the valve now, because all that debris is not there. The big thing you want to look for while this is doing is there any water leaking out underneath the washer. The way I do that on mine is I basically just pull the door back and look through, and a lot of times you have to use a little bit of light and it'll tell you whether something's awry or not. Everything looks good. Hopefully this helps some folks out. It's pretty universal, especially if you're working on like Frigidaire, Electrolux, anything newer or modern. Square drive. Just take your time. And the big thing is, until you can buy appliance again easily, you maybe find yourself in a situation where you've got to just replace a part, and it's not that big a deal. I did that with basic hand tools. Literally this and this was all that took, and it, other than me videoing it, I probably could have done it in about 10 minutes. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you have any comments or suggestions, leave them down in the comments. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks.